The Iskander M has no shortage of admirers. They include the Islamic State and other Islamist entities in Syria, Poland, Turkey, NATO as a whole, and of course the United States. Seemingly, no other Russian weapon system is as likely to steal a headline as soon as it makes an appearance somewhere on the global chessboard. To what does it owe its worldwide fan base? In part, the answer lies in its actual combat abilities. It is a medium-range missile system which uses a combination of maneuvering and therefore difficult to intercept ballistic missiles, capable of carrying a variety of conventional and nuclear warheads. It is extremely accurate, with a circular error probable of under 10 meters, which makes it useful against heavily protected small targets that would require a direct hit in order to be destroyed. Its officially acknowledged range of 500 kilometers makes it a weapon of far more than tactical importance, as it can destroy sites far behind enemy front lines and hold in check enemy value targets such as key infrastructure, high-level command posts, and logistical nodes. The entire system is based on highly mobile wheeled platforms, which are suitable for aerial transport by heavy airlifters. Iskander M deployment to Syria demonstrated Russia's ability to send these powerful warfighting and conventional deterrent weapons to almost any friendly part of the globe on a moment's notice. As of April 2016, the Russian military had 6 complete Iskander M brigades in service, with each brigade possessing 12 launch vehicles. Since each vehicle carries 2 ready-to-launch missiles, with reloads carried by the brigade's resupply vehicles, each brigade is capable of a simultaneous 24-missile volley, which would be sufficient to saturate any tactical anti-ballistic missile system currently in service or development. In effect, a single Iskander M brigade is equivalent to 3 Bayern M missile corvettes in terms of firepower, though the land-based launchers can be rapidly reloaded, whereas the corvettes would have to return to base for replenishment. The other reason for Iskander M's popularity is its political dimension. By the late 1980s, the Soviet military was using 2 sub-strategic ballistic missile systems, the 120-kilometer range Tochka and the 450-kilometer range Oka. Even though Oka's range was below the 500-kilometer threshold of the Intermediate Range Nuclear Forces Treaty, the Gorbachev government in effect made the US a present by pledging to eliminate the Okas along with longer-range missiles. Even though it left the Soviet military without a modern operational range missile system, evidently Gorbachev and others hoped that such weapons would be unnecessary in the era of the New World Order. They turned out to be wrong. The Iskander M was developed and deployed in order to fill that gap once it became clear that NATO's intentions towards post-Cold War Russia were far from benign. NATO, and especially the US, has undertaken several initiatives to render the INF Treaty obsolete. They include the deployment of intermediate-range air-launched cruise missiles, such as the JASSM, carried by tactical aircraft, whose existence clearly violates the spirit of the INF Treaty. The US Army has since deployed large numbers of ATACMS ballistic missiles, whose officially acknowledged range is 300 kilometers, though the missile's actual potential is unknown, and the LPRF program is supposed to yield an even longer-range missile for the US military. Cruise missile-carrying US naval ships, including the rather well-known USS Donald Cook, regularly approach Russian coasts. But the most direct US violation of the INF Treaty is the placement of land-based anti-ballistic systems in Eastern Europe. These systems use the naval Mk-41 launchers, which are perfectly capable of using the entire range of Tomahawk cruise missiles. Therefore, the deployment of these ABM systems also means a US breakout from the INF Treaty. The Iskander M, therefore, should be viewed as a Russian response to the US INF violations. In addition to the 9M723 ballistic missile with a range of 500 kilometers, each launch vehicle can also fire the 9M728 cruise missiles, whose actual capabilities have never been revealed, though the missile has been tested out to at least 200 kilometers. Considering that the size of these missiles is comparable to the Kaliber sea-launched weapons, whose range exceeds 2,000 kilometers, there is a definite possibility that the Iskander M could be equipped with weapons of similar range, unless the US begins to display more of an interest in re-establishing a mutually acceptable security framework for Europe.
Recent days and weeks have seen several news items pertaining to the future state of the Russian nuclear triad. The scope of modernization plans suggest the role Russia's strategic nuclear forces are to play for Russia's security foreign policy. The scale of Russian strategic nuclear modernization is impressive. President Putin recently attended the laying down of Alexander III, the 7th Bourget-class ballistic missile submarine out of 8 planned, which carries 16 multi-warhead Bulava SLBMs each. 3 of these ships are already in service, and the whole series is to become operational by 2020. It was also announced that the first Pakta heavy bomber flight is to take place in 2020, with the aircraft becoming operational by 2025. In the interim, Russia's long-range aviation will receive several squadrons of 2 160 M2 bombers, whose production is expected to resume in the upcoming years. The Sarmat heavy ICBM research and development has been recently declared complete, and the missile will begin launch testing in 2016 or 2017. The missile's unique capabilities include the ability to strike any target on the planet using multiple possible trajectories. For example, it could be used to strike North America not only by flying over the North Pole, but also using an alternative trajectory over the South Pole, which would render US ABM systems irrelevant. The construction of Vorzhesna DM over the Horizon Ballistic Missile Attack Early Warning Radars is continuing. Finally, the Russian General Staff announced the development of a system allowing strategic ballistic missiles to be retargeted following launch, which thus far was impossible to do because once the target selection was completed prior to launch, there was no way to alter it after the missile was in flight. This brief outline of current development shows that Russia is pursuing a sophisticated strategy of deterrence. The comparatively small and uniform French, Russian, and Chinese nuclear arsenals are capable of deterring only one threat, namely a nuclear attack on their national territory. The variety of capabilities inherent in Russia's triad means that its national leadership has a range of responses at its disposal and can use its capabilities to deter not only nuclear attacks against its territory, but also conventional attacks against its military targets, including outside of Russia's borders. Syria is an example of what these capabilities mean for Russia. It is no accident that Putin's request to raise the strategic nuclear force readiness level to 95% came when he instructed the General Staff to destroy any potential threat to Russian aircraft or ground facilities in Syria. The Russian military presence in Syria is not large enough to guarantee survival against a concerted NATO attack. 50 aircraft located at a single airbase, even one protected by the S-400, are still vulnerable due to their exposed location and lack of strategic depth. Russian conventional forces could not easily come to Khmeimim's aid in the event of it being attacked by NATO forces. What makes Khmeimim secure from attack is the credible and flexible deterrence posture. What makes the deterrence both credible and flexible is the variety and modernity of Russia's delivery vehicle force, which is not limited to having to launch a multi-warhead ICBM or SLBM, and which can penetrate all current or planned defenses. The credibility of Russia's nuclear deterrence is strengthened by the existence of a powerful conventional deterrent in the form of Caliber and KH-101 cruise missiles. The use of these missiles against ISIS targets was likely motivated to dissuade any countries hostile to Russia's presence in Syria because it demonstrated Russia could use these weapons to retaliate against any attack on Khmeimim. The target state would then have to choose between backing down or escalating, thus risking a nuclear exchange with Russia. If Russia simply had an ICBM and SLBM force, Khmeimim would be a much more tempting target, because an ICBM launch would be a disproportionate response to the attack. Russia's strategic force modernization plans indicate that its leadership anticipates Syria-like scenarios in the years to come. Russian cruise missile strikes against ISIS targets carried out by a combination of air and naval assets drew attention to a relatively obscure component of the Russian armed forces, namely the Caspian Flotilla. While it is not a very large military force, its importance is much greater than numbers would suggest, as its mission cannot be accomplished by other forces of the Southern Military District. The core of the force are 2 Gepard light frigates, Tardistan and Dagestan, 1 Molniya missile corvette, 3 Bullion gun corvettes, and 3 Bullion M missile corvettes supported by several smaller gunboats and minesweepers. Dagestan and the 3 Bullion M's are the Caspian flotilla's long arm, as each of the 4 ships carries 8 launch tubes for the Onyx and Caliber cruise missiles, which gives the ships the ability to strike targets 3,000 kilometers away. These 4 ships launched a total of 44 Caliber missiles against ISIS targets in Syria in 2 separate operations. 6 more Bullion M ships are to enter service with the Black Sea Fleet by 2018 to hold in check U.S. anti-ballistic missile installations in Romania, and since the 2 seas are connected by the Volga-Don Canal, permitting ships with drafts of up to 3.5 meters to travel between the seas, all 9 Bullion M ships with a total of 72 cruise missile launch tubes could be concentrated in either of the 2 seas if the situation requires. The Caspian Flotilla also has a ground component in the form of 2 naval infantry battalions supported by 8 small amphibious assault craft, capable of carrying 1 complete battalion in a single lift, which gives the flotilla an ability to deliver troops quickly to any point on the Caspian Sea's coastline, supported by the rapid-fire artillery and multiple rocket launchers of the frigates and corvettes. The one weakness of the flotilla is that its ships have weak air defenses and therefore would have to rely on Southern Military District land-based air defense and fighter cover. Nevertheless, it is easily the most powerful naval force in the Caspian, even when it is not reinforced by Black Sea Fleet units. While the cruise missile capability is what earned the flotilla its media exposure, it also carries out many other missions which are just as important. It protects the Caspian Sea pipelines and drilling installations against terror attacks and covert actions by unfriendly states, prevents piracy, smuggling, and illegal fishing operations. The presence of the Russian ships in the Caspian deters other countries from attempting to resolve disputes over drilling rights through violence and guarantees Russia the ability to maintain a maritime route to Iran, even in the face of opposition by other Caspian countries. The flotilla's pacifying presence is an important factor promoting Eurasian integration and preserving the security of the new Silk Road, and also a barrier against Turkey's attempts to establish its own sphere of influence in Central Asia. The final role of the Caspian Flotilla may become more important in the coming years, considering the recent increase in tensions between Russia and Turkey. 3 of the countries bordering the Caspian Sea, Kazakhstan, Azerbaijan, and Turkmenistan, are members of the Turkic Council and have sought military and technical assistance from Turkey and the United States. The Islamic State's activity in Afghanistan is on the rise, and ISIS international sponsors might decide to use it to destabilize post-Soviet Central Asian states in order to distract Russia from other global issues. The fact that the economics of Central Asian countries are being hurt by the drop in oil and natural gas prices make them susceptible to destabilization. All of these factors mean that the Caspian Flotilla will remain on the front lines of the current global hybrid war for years to come.